I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'm here with AR15.com at the range in Austin to talk to you about backup gun training. All right, so let's first start by defining what is the role of a backup gun. And there's a lot of different ways to look at a backup gun. So I kind of break it down in the first that makes sense is a malfunction. If your primary has a malfunction and you feel compelled to go ahead and get to that secondary, that's a great option for you. That's a great reason to have a second gun. Another one that you might think about is, what if my primary is damaged? What if in the exchange of gunfire, my primary is damaged? Well, it's good to have that backup. Another reason that it is viable, I can make a good argument, is what if in the struggle, if in a tussle, in some sort of ground fighting scenario, I lose control? In other words, my firearm is kind of lost. Fell off my body and I don't know where it's at because I'm in the middle of the fight. Another one is, what if I don't have access? What if I'm entangled with somebody and I'm using my right hand here to hold on for dear life and I can't get to my primary? Okay? And then the last one, and this is one that I feel has a lot of value, which is a gun pass. All right, so most of those are pretty obvious, but the gun pass is kind of something that maybe not a lot of people know or understand. And what a gun pass is that I take that second backup gun and I pass it to a trusted family member or friend. And then together, we can work the problem with a two-man team of sorts. So there's a lot of scenarios where that makes sense. Maybe my significant other is dressed for a formal event, doesn't have any way to carry a firearm with her, or maybe it's just easier for me to carry the two and be able to pass it along. So there's a lot of reasons why a gun pass makes sense, but the one caution is that make sure that whoever you're entrusting that firearm to understands the law and is competent enough with a firearm that they can do a good job. All right, so that's kind of like the role. But let's talk about what are the characteristics that make up a backup gun. Because when you start talking about a backup gun, generally we're talking about something small. It's like, one of the things that I caution people on is, sure, you might be able to get away with carrying something maybe a little bit bigger than what I might carry for a backup gun. But the real question that you have to ask, are you able to conceal the entire loadout? So I already have enough trouble trying to conceal my primary carry gun, and then add in a second gun and all the equipment that goes with the daily carry can be challenging. So just be honest with yourself. And it's great to then get a peer review. Ask a friend who understands concealed carry to kind of check you out when you're all dressed to the nine with your backup gun. Are you really doing a good job of concealing it, or are you just covering it? So it's nice to get some objective feedback from somebody that you trust that will be honest with you, and then you're like, what are you talking about? Are you sure? Yeah, dude, it's glaring. I can easily see it. So that's kind of like something that is valuable feedback. But the characteristics that we're looking at are going to be something that is in a smaller package that is a little bit easier for me to carry concealed. And one of the things that I talk about is this also opens up the door to start talking about other calibers. So my primary caliber might be a 9mm. That's what I'm carrying. That's what I'm using. But my backup gun, because of its smaller nature, might be in a different caliber. It could be a .380, it could be even something smaller than that, it could be a .38 Special if I'm choosing to carry a wheel gun. And it's been recent that we've started to see some of the semi-automatics that are small enough to be carried as a backup gun that are chambered in 9mm. Now there have been some that were pretty small subcompact pistols, but I don't think they were small enough to carry as a backup gun. And how do I define that? How do I really define whether or not I can carry it? Because one of the other things we talk about is carry location. So for me, for it to truly be a backup gun means that I've got to be able to carry it in an ankle holster, because that's one of the places that I would carry a backup gun. And if I can't carry it on an ankle because it's too big, well then it really wouldn't qualify, at least for me, in being a backup gun. Now, after you've talked about characteristics, and one of the things that we typically see with the characteristics are some of the cons. So pros are small and caliber and things that are conducive to it being a backup gun, but some of the cons are also the fact that because it's small, they typically have the shorter sight radius, which can make it a little bit more challenging to shoot. And what I mean by that is not only do you have a shorter sight radius, but typically some of these backup guns have terrible sight systems. If you're fortunate, you can replace them. Some of them you really don't have a choice, but most of them out there are either coming with better sight systems or they can be upgraded with some aftermarket sight systems. So small also can mean a smaller sight radius. And now where does that actually come into play with the shooting component is because of that shorter sight radius, your shooting errors are going to be more pronounced. So subtle misalignments that you could get away with a full-size gun are going to show up a little bit more dramatically with these backup guns. Now, when we talk about another characteristic of these backup guns that's a con, the fire control systems. A lot of the fire control systems that are on some of these smaller backup guns they're not user-friendly. They either have a very long trigger pull, or they have a very heavy trigger pull, or they have a combination of long and heavy. And that's a training solution. You can obviously mitigate some of that if you put a little time and energy into training with it. But most of the time, we're not seeing people that are putting in a lot of time training with their backup gun. I mean, training exclusively with their backup gun. So it's not, in my opinion, realistic to expect somebody to kind of work that problem with training, since we don't see many people training with their backup gun. Now, one of the things that can make that a little bit easier is interoperability. So if you can keep your backup gun familiar or somewhat close to maybe your primary carry gun, it can be a little bit easier. So in other words, the gap between the two is a little bit reduced because there's some familiarity, whether it be in the controls, whether it be in the sight system, whether it be in maybe, even the manufacturers. There's something that's close enough that it can be a little bit easier to jump that gap between the different platforms. All right, so once we're done with interoperability, let's talk about carry methods. So when it comes to backup guns, we've got a plethora of different carry methods. And one of the things that I talk about is that you should explore all of them. Don't paint yourself into a corner. The backup gun is designed as an in extremis circumstance, but it also falls into some other roles that, hey, you know what? Maybe I've got to dress in formal wear and I don't really have the ability to carry anything around my waistline. So either pocket carry or ankle carry start to come into the equation. So I really think that carry methods you need to be a little bit more open to some different carry methods other than what's just accommodating on your waist. So for me, that's going to be pocket carry, both front and back pocket. That's going to be ankle carry. That's going to be more of like a belly band style carry. These are other options that I can try to bring into my fold to help create a scenario that I can pretty much accommodate any type of situation that I want to carry a backup gun. So for instance, for me, my primary carry gun is usually strapped to my strong side inside the waistband. Great. You know what? Tonight I think I feel, maybe we're going to go out for a nice dinner and it's just easy for me to carry a spare gun, a pass gun for my significant other, and I'm just going to go ahead and strap that onto my ankle holster. Perfect, easy day. I really didn't change my primary carry loadout. All I did was just added something in an ankle carry type format. So I think that it opens up a lot of doors for people to think about carrying a backup gun when you start to think about some of the other locations or carry methods. Now, one of the things that I talk about is access to your backup gun is probably not going to be as fast as access to your primary. But the reason that you're carrying a backup gun may be that I can't get to that primary. So yes, I still want to be able to get to it quickly, but it may not be as important to get to it as quickly. Just having it available may be more important. So one of the things that we talk about is the importance behind training with your backup gun. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but when we get to the carry factor and carrying it, what I really encourage people to do is to try and find time and find the excuse to actually get out there and train with your backup gun. So my backup gun, I have two. I have a 5-shot revolver. Great, I love it. But then my newest backup gun is a SIG P365. And I've started carrying this in an ankle holster. And again, that's one of the criterion that I use to judge or to kind of like define the role or a characteristic of a backup gun is, can I carry it in an ankle holster? And if I can, well, then it pretty much falls into that. But one of the things that we talk about is the characteristics that make a backup gun also make it more challenging to shoot. And one of those characteristics is recoil control. So I want to spend a lot of time talking about how to improve recoil control with these small platforms. All right, so the first thing we talk about is that these small guns usually do not give me or do not afford me the ability to get my full hand on. Now, you can add some of these extensions, but whatever you're adding here, you're extending the profile and potentially defeating the purpose of the backup gun, which is to try to keep it in a small concealable package. So if I add anything here, I might be reducing that. The next thing that we talk about is, well, if I can't squeeze that pinky on, no big deal. All I'm going to do is I'm going to let the pinky roll completely underneath the grip. So I literally am rolling the pinky and getting it straight underneath. What that's going to allow me to do is that's going to allow me to still squeeze nice and hard with that pinky, but I'm just going to be doing it underneath the magazine base pad. Now, the next thing that we talk about is the rest of our hands need to engulf the gun as best as possible. The biggest thing that we talk about is overcoming this grip. Once I can overcome this grip, a lot of the shooting is actually not that hard, not that bad. We'll talk about a few mechanics that we need to work on to help improve recoil control, but one of them is being able to grip that gun in as best a position as possible, trying to cover as much real estate. The more real estate I can occupy, the more friction I can apply, the improved recoil management I can see. All right, so once I use the inline grip and I get everything in position here, one of the things that we talk about is the application of your grip, right? So there are 3 points that we have to think about when it comes to our crush grip. The first is that I want to squeeze with the pinkies, which is why dropping that pinky down underneath the base pad is a viable option, because that allows me to still squeeze hard with the pinkies. Next, I really want to press inward with my heels. And a lot of times what that means is I'm not only going to press inward with my heels, but I'm going to slightly rotate my elbows down. And that's going to press my heels in together. So what that allows me to do is create 360 degrees of force or pressure around the gun. The last thing I want to do is make sure that my wrists are locked, all right? If I can do that, I'm probably going to see some improvements in my recoil. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and fire about 2 or 3 shots without applying any of those. 2 or 3 shots. All right, so baseline, kind of see what kind of recoil I can expect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and apply all of those little things that we just talked about right now. Okay, that's just working my grip. The next thing I want to do is I want to start to bring into the equation the work for my shoulders. So a lot of times we'll see people raise their shoulders up and rotate their shoulders forward. Try to keep your shoulders neutral, active, but neutral. So I don't want to do any kind of craziness. All I want to do is I want to just make sure that my shoulders are active, they're engaged. All right, so now let's add the grip with the new shoulder position. All right, here we go. All right, so again, a little bit improvement in my recoil. Now the last thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a little bit of work from our waist. So what I'm going to do here is if I'm standing upright, I've got good posture, right? I've got good posture right here. My mom would be very happy with me. However, with the recoil impulse, eventually that's going to rock me back onto my heels. So most shooters will shoot with kind of like a static base where maybe their weight is distributed equally between the toes and the heels, right? But what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to shift our weight forward. So I want to shift from the heels or being flat to literally making way to be on the toes. So my heels are up, all right? What this is going to do is going to give you a forward attitude. So apply the grip, apply the shoulders. Now let's add the toes to the equation. So now I'm going to be kind of leaning in and doing all the things that we just talked about. So as I start to add all those little components to recoil control, shooting this small subcompact backup gun doesn't really get too, it's not as difficult as a lot of people think. Sure, it's shorter, it's lighter, but you can overcome a lot of that with just adding a little bit of tweaks to your technique. Now, one of the other things that I talk about is what are some of the training considerations. So we've talked about how to overcome recoil control, right? That gets you under the range, that gets you training, that gets you feeling very comfortable with the platform that you have in the backup gun role. Now, training considerations. What do I need to be doing? Well, these backup guns also have another, challenge, which is the shorter sight radius might make them a little bit more challenging to shoot at extended ranges. So we talk about the zones that you can find yourself in a handgun fight, right? So the first zone, contact. I'm within arm's reach of the bad guy. Probably not going to be going to my primary or my backup gun because we're just in that close proximity and I got to create time and space to be able to do that. Second is I'm in close range, and that's going to be from about maybe 3 to about the 7-ish yard line, right? Then I might get to the intermediate, which is going to be from maybe the 7 to the 15. And then extreme range is going to be 15 and beyond, all right? Now, we know that at the extreme ranges for a handgun, we're not seeing a lot of self-defense shootings. But there's still a few out there. So one of the things that I try to tell people is never create an excuse for you not to want to do something. Oh, statistics say that I'm never going to have to shoot past this. Well, that's not entirely true, number one. What it should say is the odds of you having to shoot from that distance are fairly low. What are those odds? Is it 5%, 10%? Because whatever those odds are, that's the amount of training time that you probably should be putting into it. Right? That's the key thing, is that don't omit training at distance just because you're shooting this backup gun. Just put the same amount of time that you could probably expect to see your need to fire at those extreme ranges. So I expect to see a lot more work on the extreme distance with my backup gun just because I don't want to find myself in a situation where that's the only gun I have and that's the shot I'm required to take. 15, 20, 25, 35-yard shot. Okay, again, we can create a lot of scenarios where that's possible. It's just not very probable. Now, the other training consideration that I really encourage people to think about is their shot-to-shot recovery. Being able to fire quickly and fast, right? So training back at distance at those extreme ranges, definitely something you want to do. But let's talk about what I want to try to do to be able to decrease that shot-to-shot recovery time. Well, everything we were talking about with regards to recoil control, that is exactly what you want to be doing. All right, so here we'll do a couple drills where now what we're trying to do is we're trying to decrease that shot-to-shot recovery time, right? So two training considerations that we want are accuracy at distance and then the ability to fire rapid shots at close range. Okay, so here we go. I want to be able to fire, 3 to 5 shots in a fairly rapid succession. So if I'm able to do that and keep that weapon system, again, I'm shooting as fast as I can see my sights. There becomes like this open-mindedness to carrying this on a more frequent basis. You're like, wait a minute, I can shoot at distance, and I can shoot at distance accurately, and I can shoot at close range rapidly. Wait a minute, now this backup gun is starting to make a little bit more sense. And now maybe this backup gun actually moves to being my primary. I actually feel comfortable enough to be carrying this as a primary gun, even though it's small. So again, I want to get up on target, find everything I need to find, and just be able to work that sight system, again, shooting only as fast as I can guarantee the hits or see my sights. So in the short time, and when I say short time, probably been shooting these subcompacts now for maybe 3-5 years, and in particular the SIG 365, probably for about 3, maybe 4 years. And in that time, I've become enamored with its performance, right? It's a small, compact, subcompact pistol frame, but it holds 10 rounds. The fire control system, huge improvement over many of the other firearms in its class. The sight system has also been improved to give me the ability to be accurate at distance. So it is very hard for me sometimes to come up with a reason why I wouldn't want to carry this backup gun as my primary. Even though I have identified it as a backup gun, more and more times I'm finding reasons that I would just want to carry it as my primary, right? Extreme heat, I'm dealing with a hot environment. Summertime's rolling around here, it's gonna get hot. I'm not gonna really wanna be carrying a heavy object. So if I can streamline down to a smaller compact platform, that makes a lot of sense. But remember, the whole process of discovering this as a potential primary firearm was because it fit the bill as a backup gun. And it does that extremely well. But once you start to appreciate it as a backup gun, you now start to realize this can be my primary carry gun. All right, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. If you have any similar experiences or you carry something different as a backup gun, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your experience, particularly if it's something that's kind of really on the fringes there. I'd like to see or hear how that's worked for you. Any kind of information that we can provide or kind of like push out to the students as possibilities is always welcome information. So feel free to data dump whenever you can. All right, until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Take care and stay safe.